I, 34F, had been married for 12 years when my world imploded at Christmas dinner. The turkey was perfectly golden, the table set with my grandmother's china, and our 8-year-old son was excitedly telling us about his school play. Everything looked picture-perfect from the outside, but I'd been sensing something was off for months. My husband had been working late more frequently, taking mysterious phone calls in the garage, and showing less interest in family activities. When I'd ask about it, he'd brush me off with vague explanations about work stress. I'd started to suspect an affair, but I never imagined the depth of his betrayal until that Christmas evening. We were halfway through dinner when he cleared his throat and announced he had something important to tell us. My stomach dropped immediately. The way he said it, with that rehearsed tone people use when they're about to deliver devastating news, made me grip my fork tighter. He told us he was selling the house. Just like that. No discussion, no warning. He explained that his girlfriend needed somewhere bigger for her kids, and our current home would provide the down payment for their new place together. The words hit me like physical blows, but what destroyed me completely was watching our son's face crumble as his father casually dismantled his entire world. Our boy started crying, asking where he would live, whether he'd have to change schools, if he could take his dog. My husband, with shocking callousness, began detailing how our son would spend weekends with him and his new family, how he'd have step-siblings to play with, how this was actually a good thing for everyone involved. I sat there in stunned silence, watching this man I'd loved and trusted for over a decade methodically destroy our family while carving turkey. The casual cruelty of it all was breathtaking. He'd planned this moment, chosen Christmas dinner as his stage, and delivered it like he was announcing a job promotion. But here's what my husband didn't know. I'd been preparing for this possibility for months. Those late nights and mysterious calls hadn't gone unnoticed. I'd hired a private investigator 3 months earlier when I found a receipt for jewelry I'd never received. The investigator had been thorough, documenting not just the affair but also my husband's financial activities. What we discovered was far worse than simple infidelity. My husband had been systematically moving money out of our joint accounts, transferring funds to accounts I didn't know existed. He'd taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge, forging my signature on documents. He'd been planning this exit strategy for over a year, methodically stealing from our family while pretending to be a loving husband and father. The investigator had also uncovered that his girlfriend was married too, and her husband had no idea about the affair. She'd been telling her spouse she was working late at her marketing job while she was actually with my husband. The web of lies was extensive and well orchestrated. I'd spent weeks consulting with a divorce attorney, documenting everything, and preparing for various scenarios. I'd opened my own bank account, secured copies of all our financial documents, and even recorded some of my husband's phone conversations when he thought I wasn't home. I'd been building a case, but I never expected him to hand me such a perfect opportunity for revenge. As he continued explaining his plans to our sobbing son, describing how wonderful their new blended family would be, I quietly stood up from the table. I walked to my purse in the hallway, retrieved an envelope I'd been carrying for weeks, and returned to the dining room. I handed him the envelope without saying a word. He looked puzzled but opened it immediately, probably expecting divorce papers or some emotional letter begging him to reconsider. Instead, he found photographs. The first photo showed him and his girlfriend entering a hotel room. The second captured them at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. The third was taken outside her house, showing him leaving early one morning. But the fourth photo was the one that made his face go completely white. It was a picture of him at a bank, clearly visible through the window, sitting across from a loan officer. The timestamp showed it was taken on a day he'd told me he was at a work conference. The investigator had followed him there and documented him taking out that secret second mortgage. Beneath the photos was a letter from my attorney, detailing every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, and every illegal financial move he'd made over the past year. The letter explained that all evidence had been turned over to both the police and the district attorney's office. It outlined the criminal charges he was facing: fraud, forgery, theft, and embezzlement of marital assets. But that wasn't all. The envelope also contained a copy of an email I'd sent to his girlfriend's husband earlier that day. I'd included photos of the affair, copies of hotel receipts, and a detailed timeline of their relationship. I'd also sent copies to both their workplaces, since they'd been using company time and resources to conduct their affair. My husband's hands were shaking as he read through everything. He kept looking up at me with this expression of complete shock, as if he couldn't believe I'd been capable of such thorough preparation. He'd underestimated me completely, assuming I was just the naive housewife who'd never suspect his schemes. The final document in the envelope was a restraining order I'd filed that morning. It required him to leave our house immediately and prohibited him from accessing any of our joint accounts, which I'd already frozen with the help of my attorney. I told him he had 30 minutes to pack a bag and leave. I explained that the locks would be changed within the hour, and that any attempt to return would result in his immediate arrest. I informed him that our son would not be spending weekends with him until the criminal charges were resolved, and that all future communication would go through our attorneys. The transformation in the room was immediate and dramatic. My husband went from smug confidence to complete panic in the span of minutes. He started trying to explain, to justify his actions, to negotiate some kind of deal. He claimed he'd been planning to tell me about the money, that he was going to make sure I was taken care of, that this was all a misunderstanding. I didn't respond to any of his desperate explanations. I simply sat back down next to our son, who had stopped crying and was watching this unfold with wide eyes. I told our boy that Daddy had made some very bad choices, but that we were going to be okay. I assured him that he wouldn't have to change schools, that he could keep his dog, and that our house would remain his home. My husband tried one last desperate move, threatening to fight me in court, claiming I'd never be able to prove anything. That's when I pulled out my phone and played a recording of him bragging to his girlfriend about how easy it had been to fool me, how he'd been moving money for months, and how stupid I was for never noticing. The recording had been captured by a small device I'd hidden in his car after the investigator suggested it. In the recording, he laughed about forging my signature and joked about how he'd be able to take half of everything in the divorce while keeping his hidden assets secret. His face went from white to gray as he realized the full extent of what I'd documented. Every crime, every lie, every moment of betrayal had been carefully recorded and preserved. He left that night with a single suitcase, and I never saw him again except in court. Update 1. The aftermath moved quickly. Within a week, my husband was arrested at his girlfriend's house on multiple felony charges. The local newspaper picked up the story because of the amount of money involved and the elaborate nature of the fraud scheme. His girlfriend's marriage imploded immediately. Her husband filed for divorce and took their kids. She lost her job when her company discovered she'd been using work trips as cover for her affair. The hotel receipts I'd provided showed she'd been billing personal expenses to her corporate account. My husband's employer conducted their own investigation and discovered he'd been falsifying expense reports and using company credit cards for personal purchases related to his affair. He was fired and faced additional charges for embezzlement from his workplace. The house sale he'd planned never happened, obviously. The second mortgage he'd taken out illegally was voided by the court, and the bank had to absorb the loss. All the money he'd stolen was recovered and returned to our accounts, plus penalties and interest. Update 2. 6 months later, my husband pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay substantial restitution. His girlfriend was charged as an accessory in some of the financial crimes, since she'd knowingly benefited from stolen money. The divorce was finalized while he was in prison. I received full custody of our son, the house, and the majority of our assets. The judge was particularly harsh because of the criminal nature of his actions and the impact on our child. Our son started therapy to help him process everything that happened. It was difficult at first, but children are remarkably resilient. He's doing well in school, has made new friends, and rarely asks about his father anymore. I kept my maiden name after the divorce and started a new career in victim advocacy, helping other women who've been financially abused by their spouses. The experience taught me that financial infidelity is often more devastating than sexual infidelity, and it's far more common than people realize. Update 3. 2 years have passed since that Christmas dinner. My ex-husband was released from prison early for good behavior, but he struggled to rebuild his life. His criminal record makes employment difficult, and he's living in a small apartment across town. He's attempted to contact our son a few times, but our boy has shown little interest in rebuilding that relationship. The therapy helped him understand that his father's choices weren't his fault, but it also helped him recognize the toxicity of that relationship. His former girlfriend moved to another state after her divorce was finalized. She lost custody of her children and has had minimal contact with them since the scandal broke. I eventually started dating again and met someone wonderful who treats both my son and me with genuine respect and kindness. We're taking things slowly, but it's refreshing to be with someone who values honesty and communication. The house that my ex-husband wanted to sell to fund his new life with his girlfriend is now truly our sanctuary. We've redecorated, created new memories, and built a peaceful life together. Sometimes I walk through those rooms and remember that Christmas dinner, but instead of feeling pain, I feel proud of how I handled the situation. Looking back, I realize that the months of preparation and investigation weren't just about gathering evidence for divorce proceedings. They were about reclaiming my power and refusing to be a victim of someone else's selfish choices. That envelope I handed him contained more than just photographs and legal documents. It contained the message that I wasn't the naive, trusting wife he thought he could manipulate and discard. It showed him that actions have consequences, and that betraying your family comes with a price far higher than he'd ever imagined. The most satisfying part wasn't the criminal charges or the financial recovery. It was the look on his face when he realized that while he'd been planning his exit strategy, I'd been planning his downfall. He'd underestimated me completely, and that miscalculation cost him everything he thought he was so cleverly securing for himself. My son and I are stronger now, more independent, and infinitely happier. We've learned that family isn't about blood relations or legal documents. It's about people who show up for each other, who keep their promises, and who choose love over selfishness every single day. That Christmas dinner was the end of one chapter of our lives, but it was also the beginning of something much better. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best transformations, and I'm grateful every day that I had the strength and foresight to fight back when it mattered most.